Yeah, I did see the Beatles thing. Is that your favorite band?
I would say it's my favorite band. Yes,
Yeah.
I would say my favorite rock performer is David Bowie,
Okay.
and I have some other favorite kind of solo artists.
Hmm.
But as far as like, a group of musicians working together, I can't think of anybody better than the Beatles.
Because I remember somebody telling me this that I used to work with a long time ago. He was saying apparently is this true? There's a rivalry between people who say Rolling Stones, people who say the Beatles.
Yeah, it's probably not, uh, a tense or an intense rivalry, but yeah, I mean, it's like, people who drive Corvettes versus Camaros, that kind of thing. Some people are just,
Yeah.
some people like Coke, some people like Pepsi,
Yeah. Okay.
but they don't get into fisticuffs over it.
Yeah. I'm trying to think so I'm not the biggest. I mean, I like rock and roll, but I'm more of like a hip hop kind of guy.
Yeah.
And maybe like an equivalent would be there's people who say Jay Z or Nas as like the bet, or like Notorious B.I.G. or Tupac,
Right.
something like that. Maybe
Well,
that
isn't
would
that
be.
kind of like a West Coast, East Coast kind of thing?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the thing is, yeah, there was that rivalry, um, and the two different sounds, which yeah, at the time, I think the stereotype was New York rappers were more lyrical.
Mm-hmm.
West Coast had the G funk and the beats were different, like
Yeah.
very different sounding.
Well, I think the
Uh,
Beatles and the Stones, I mean, they had a friendly rivalry, but they were also friends.
oh,
And,
really?
and the Beatles actually wrote some songs for the Rolling Stones early on,
Oh,
because the
wow.
Stones started really as like more of an R&B group.
Oh, okay.
They weren't, they were more into the blues, and they weren't really, um, for the most part, they didn't have the same rock and roll influences that the Beatles had.
Hmm.
So that, I mean, they were very, very different. It's just that when their sounds kind of congealed, not congealed, kind of
Coalesce.
coalesce. That's the word I was looking for. When their sounds kind of coalesced in the early '60s, and you had the British invasion,
Hmm.
they couldn't help but compete, even though their sounds were still pretty different. They were competing for the top spot on the charts,
Hmm.
and most people just sort of lump rock and roll of all stripes in together, even though there are very, very different forms of rock.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I know that from the movie School of Rock with Jack
Oh
Black,
yeah,
and he
that's
has
a great movie. I love that.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
funny. He's got the chalkboard, and I remember there's one scene in the movie where he's there's like a B-roll, and um, there's music playing, and it's just kind of progressing along the storyline. I think they call it a B-roll, and um, he's lecturing to the students, and he's got different diagrams of like all these different types of rock and roll.
Yeah.
Um, One thing that I never that I kind of found out was how influential British like groups like were here.
Mm-hmm.
Like they were huge here
Oh yeah.
to the point where I almost think like I almost didn't realize are there any American bands? But there are,
Oh sure.
but
And
just
in before the Beatles came along, and then the British invasion, the Beatles kind of opened the door for all these British bands
mhm.
to get radio airplay in the States.